This is the religious compound in Waco, Texas that is still under siege. Under siege by federal agents who want to capture cult leader Vernon Howell. He also goes by the name David Koresh. Federal agents have to watch every move because Howell is heavily armed. He has convinced his followers that they have to obey him because he is the Messiah and he will not give up until God tells him to. Federal agents say what he really is a dangerous madman who has innocent people under his spell. Who is cult leader Vernon Howell, also known as David Koresh, and why has he declared himself the Messiah? Later in the show, we're going to meet David Koresh's grandmother and the aunt, who say he's not a madman, but a very loving man who just wants to help others. First, meet Debbie and her husband, David. They are former members of David Koresh's cult. 3 years ago, he kicked them out for breaking the dietary rules. Debbie and David say they didn't realize then that was the best thing that could have happened to them. Debbie, tell us first what it was like living on the compound with David as the leader.
It was very hard, Sally. He was very manipulative. He was very controlling. He told lies about me all the time. I was not one of his favorite people, so it was even worse for me. He was very, just very mean.
How did you get there in the first place, the two of you?
I was born onto Mount Carmel and was just raised to it and was there when he took over.
Okay, same with me also. I was born into the group. Well, actually, my father joined when I was 5, and I was raised in the group many years before Koresh actually took over.
Now, you said he spread lies about you. What kind of lies?
He constantly said that I was trying to, how do you say it, I wanted to have sex with the other men. He thought I wanted to have sex with him.
He basically spread around the idea that she was a whore, she was a cheap woman, just real loose, always just running her down all the time.
Sexually, what happens at the compound?
He has a harem. He has a group of women who...
How many?
Oh, probably around 20 to 25 women total.
Yes.
All the women in the group are considered to be his wives. Any woman, ranging from little girls all the way up to old women. Now, from that group, he will select ones to actually have relations with, so he will not have relations with the very young or the very old, so he'll pick the ones that he would be his favorites to have children by. And these children that are born from these relations are the house of David, which is a term he uses for the seed of God, the elect, the ones who will rule with him in his kingdom.
Have you ever seen him be abusive to the children?
Yes, I have. There was an 8-month-old at one time, and the mother of this 8-month-old little girl was not very popular with him at the time. And when you're not very popular with him, he takes it out on your children. And so he beat this little girl for 40 minutes straight, and I mean, he just bruised her all up.
The little girl was just in fits. I mean, she was going into some kind of convulsions because his idea is that you beat a child until he learns his lesson or his or her lesson and stops crying, and that's when they learn their lesson. So, of course, the child keeps crying.
What would happen with other people who disobey him in the compound?
There were various punishments, ranging from deprivation of food. He could have one of the bigger men in the compound get a big stick and beat you around the camp with it. All different kinds of punishments, depending on what he felt was appropriate.
Are the grown-up men in the compound expected to be celibate?
Yes.
That's part of what we heard.
Yes, definitely. About 3 months after we got out, in about August of '89, he had a new message from God that said that all the men in the group had to give up any relations with their wives. Their wives became his wives, and they had to stay celibate, awaiting a future time when God would give them their perfect mate. But that hasn't happened.
In fact, he taught that what they perceived as their wives, not really their wives, they were his, therefore that they were committing adultery with them.
Wow. Do you have family members who are still in the compound?
Yes, I have my mother and my father in it.
How do you feel about what's happening there now?
I feel very sad, but yet I expected it.
Why were you kicked out of the compound, Debbie? What is it? It said you broke a dietary law. What law did you break?
We ate chocolate chip ice cream. Chocolate was against the rules. We ate some packaged macaroni and cheese. You did not eat the cheese because it had things that weren't real.
So when he found, David, does that happen to you also?
Yes.
It was for eating chocolate?
Yes, that's exactly.
When you first came out of the compound, when you were kicked out, how did you feel?
We thought that we were going to hell because we had disobeyed the Messiah, and we were very sorry.
He was very sorry, and I was in a sense, but yet at the same time, I was just so fed up with it. I just wanted to go out and have my fun and go to hell having fun.
I was wondering, did he brainwash people who wanted to leave?
What was it? He didn't
Not to come
brainwash
back.
people who were?
What keeps people in the compound? Isn't that what you're saying? I mean, why would somebody stay there?
Would he be afraid to leave?
Yeah, there's a lot of peer pressure in the group. Everybody's looking at everybody else. Everybody's watching everybody else in the group. In fact, you're supposed to tell on other people if they disobey. You're supposed to go right to Koresh and say, I know that so-and-so is doing this, and they should be punished. So there's a lot of backbiting and just backstabbing in the group to keep people in.
Did the two of you honestly believe this man was the Messiah? Explain.
Yes, I believed
Yes.
it with all my heart.
What are some of the other strange rules that you had?
Okay, well, there was a lot of different food combination rules. Anybody familiar with the Seventh Adventist Church, they have a lot of dietary rules that they have, which they don't implement too much right now. But if you dig into the writings of the Seventh-day Adventist prophetess Ellen White, you'll find a lot of unusual dietary rules. And not only that, there were rules about
How to
going into
dress,
how to dress,
how to do your hair.
how to do your
What
hair.
are the
wear
how to
makeup.
dress rules?
Women had to wear blouses that went below their bottom so that even if they bent over, the men could not see the bottom curve of it. We had to have blouses up to here so that you couldn't see any of this. We had to have sleeves down to here.
And there was a rule. it was
Couldn't
even
tuck in our dresses and blouses into our skirts.
There was even an allowance where if a woman bent over and was revealing her shape of her buttocks, the men were allowed to give her a swift kick in the rear to punish her.
And the hair rule?
We weren't allowed to put it back, put it up, dye it, curl it. It was just supposed to be, cut it. It was supposed to be long.
You said that you were born into the cult. What led your parents to that, or what brings other people to this? Are they looking for something?
You have to be. You have to be looking for something to go into that. You don't just go from I don't care to all of a sudden you jump into something like that. My parents were already Seventh-day Adventists.
Other than eating the chocolate that got you to be kicked out of the group, how did you change your mind that this group was wrong?
It was a long process for me. I was out of the group for about a year. And
So you believed it was right when you were kicked out.
Right.
When you were kicked out, you thought you're doomed to hell, and this is the worst thing that could ever happen to you, when in effect it turns out it was the best.
That's
Right.
right.
So how did you deprogram, I guess, is what we're asking.
I have a friend of mine had left the group about 3 months later, and he pointed out to me that Koresh was twisting the Bible. He showed me some scriptures in the Bible that were being twisted beyond recognition, and I realized that Koresh was using the Bible to manipulate people for his own ends.
I just wanted to know, since people have these problems and they go there, what can we do to help people from going there? I mean, you know, you've been there. What could have been there to help you to get out?
Well, when you have a friend or someone you know that you think is getting involved in a cult, the first thing you have to do is get information. You have to find out about the cult, find out the background. Just get all the information you can, do a lot of research, and then you have to, armed with that information, you've got to go to your friend or have other people go to your friend that you trust and just tell this person, look, this is what's going on.
Tell me about the physical setup of the compound. Are there tunnels and things below the compound?
Okay, well, that's one thing that when we lived there about 3 years ago, the compound as it exists today was not there. They have built that entire complex within the past 2 years. When we lived there, it was just a row of houses along the road inside the compound, and Koresh has torn down all the structures on the property and built this large central complex.
What does Vernon believe? What does he think he is destined to do?
He believes he's Christ. He believes he's destined to take his mighty army, his mighty men, and eventually go out in the world, whether it's before his face is aflame or after, which David could explain what that means, and go out and kill God's enemies.
He believes that he is going to, with all the resurrected saints from the past ages, with his mighty men today, his followers, is going to go out and rape women, kill children, and murder the men, and destroy Babylon, which would be the current world system.
So he wants to destroy the world that we're in because it is evil?
And yes, and set up his
Right.
own kingdom, which he will reign over from Mount Zion and Jerusalem.
My question is, I wonder, in your daily lives, do you have any type of education, like academics or either religious from the Bible? Any education of the children? Or the adults, too?
You're talking about in the life of the cult?
Yes.
Yes, they do educate their children. A lot of Bible instruction, plus just rudimentary mathematics and history, things like that. Yeah, they do tend to try to educate their children.
Yes.
Did you go out shopping for your clothing, or were they made?
We shopped for our clothing, most of us. We did make some, but we went out and shopped according to the guidelines that we could wear.
Do you perceive this as being another Jim Jones?
No, I don't, because I don't believe that the followers are suicidal or that Koresh will commit suicide. I think that he wants to maintain the image of being persecuted by authorities because of religious persecution. So I believe he wants to be killed or be a martyr.
So that would make him a martyr?
Yes.
And that is basically what he wants, to string it along until he is killed?
I think that he would prefer that.
Do you think he considers you an enemy now that you're speaking out against him?
Definitely.
We would be considered Judas, the worst traitors possible. He would be looking very much forward to bringing his army and killing us.
He's talked about killing us already. He asked my mother-in-law if she could kill her son.
What did your mother say when she was asked to kill you?
She left.
Did any of you come from dysfunctional homes? What are you looking for, love or acceptance?
They were born in it, so I guess you'd have to ask them what the other people were. What are the other people looking for? Do you know?
They're insecure about where they're going in life. They need direction. They may be very insecure about what the Bible means, and they want somebody to tell them what to do. Where should I go?
They don't want to have to think for themselves.
Where's your faith at now, and where do you worship? Where have you gone to with...
I would consider myself now a born-again Christian. I found the true Jesus Christ. I don't...
How difficult was it for you leaving the compound? How did you find work? How did you adjust to the world outside, having been brought up in this?
Well, when we came out, the first night we slept in our car. The second night we went and asked for help from a religious community. We had a couple of people that helped us out. Then our mother-in-law helped us stay in hotels. He found work. We just
had to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and just...
What's the hardest thing for you to have adjusted to in the outside world?
We had a hard time adjusting to the idea that we had to decide things for ourselves, that we had to make our own decisions and live our own lives according to, what we perceived.
When we finally realized that Vernon, or David Koresh, was not right, that he was false, the man that helped us realize that, we then looked to him to lead us.
You tried to find somebody to replace the other person.
Because that's what
we were starting to go in that direction, but then we got out of that.
When we come back, we're going to meet David Koresh's grandmother and his aunt, who say, no, he is not a fanatic, religious madman. Stay with us as we continue looking at the man who calls himself the Messiah. Now please meet David Koresh's grandmother, Jean, and his aunt, Susan. Jean, we're going to start with you. What can you tell us about your grandson, David?
He's the most wonderful grandson I ever saw. He loves everybody and helps everybody.
Then what do you make of what's been happening?
It's hurting me very bad. It's made me sick because I know he's not that kind of person.
So you do not believe that he's done any of those things?
I sure don't.
You do not. What do you think of the two young people that we've been talking to?
I think they enjoyed their food there, the way they were taken care of, and I do believe they wanted to go out and get a part of the world which he wasn't teaching. He was trying to teach them to be right, but I feel that they wanted to go out and have some fun.
If you don't believe what's going on, don't you believe your own grandson? He himself said he had 19 wives. He himself said he'd had a lot of children.
On CNN, he said that.
He himself, they are shooting at government people. They are killing people. And you are trying to tell us that none of this is happening.
Well, honey, who shot first? If that's a question.
I wasn't there, were you?
Did you see it on news?
Did you?
I sure saw.
Yeah, I sure saw it,
Did
too.
you see the one that fell out the door and crawled back in when the other bullet started?
Did you see them shoot at people through the roof and watch them when they fell
Who
off?
started first, honey? That's why I'm asking you.
You don't know
Yes,
anyone?
Jean, what are you worried about as far as your grandson is concerned? What's
his
worrying?
life, because if he comes out, he will be shot. I do believe it.
Have you talked to him since this started?
No, I tried.
And why have you not been able to talk to him?
They wouldn't let me.
Who would not let you?
Well, my daughter-in-law called for me because I was very sick. She called the FBI and several people.
Now, Susan, it's been reported that David has sexually abused and mistreated children. Do you believe these accusations?
Well, I've seen that it's been disproved, so no, I don't believe it.
In what way has it been disproved?
Well, he's released 21 children, and none of them
were
have
his.
been...
None of them are his children.
Do you know that for a fact?
Yes, and I also know of children who are, there's a little girl named Rachel Sylvia who came into the group in 1985. She's now about 13 years old. She has not been released because she's not considered a child anymore. She's considered one of his wives, definitely.
And how does that disprove? Just because he sent children out and they don't have marks on them. There is such thing as psychological abuse.
They
and in
proved
some
they're not that
ways
way
can
either.
No, they haven't.
So can that be covered up?
You can still be happy. You can still... They're children. What do you expect from them?
Susan, what do you make of this? You said you thought he was brainwashed. Who brainwashed him?
The people in the beginning, when he went into it, I believe that this is what they intended for him to be.
The people in the compound brainwashed him?
When he went in.
Do you believe he is the Messiah?
No.
You do not?
I do not.
But do you believe he thinks he is?
I'm not sure about that.
Well,
Okay.
then you might be lying. Then you might be saying then. That's what you're saying. He might be lying. He might be trying to deceive people, which he would be a liar and he would be a con artist. And that's what you're
Because
saying.
he said it, so he either has to believe it or he doesn't.
Tell me what he was like as a young man.
He was, the times that I was with him, he was always a very good boy.
And Susan, what was he like?
What was he like?
He was kind to me, you know.
When was the last time you saw him, Susan?
It's been a couple of years since I've seen him. I've
And-
talked to him on the telephone.
Jean, when was the last time?
A little over a year ago, he came from California, and he came to my house, and I was at my other son's house babysitting. So he called me, said, "Oh, Grandma, I wanted to visit with you and spend the night with you while I'm here." So, excuse me, he came on over there. He said, "Are you hungry?" And, you know, how many children are there? So I told him, and he brought I said, "Well, I'd like to have a taco." He brought a big bag of tacos. So he told me he'd like for me to call his father to come visit. So we did.
Where is his father?
Well, right now, I don't know. He's really tore up over all this mess.
Where was his father, your son, when you saw him last?
He was on TV right after this started. And he almost had a nervous breakdown.
He gave one interview, and
That's it.
So you don't know where your son went?
No.
Yes, Jean and Susan, your family, and you know David Koresh the best, probably even better than the ex-members. And even as we speak, news reports are saying that the FBI is moving tanks to the compound. What advice do you have on how to get the message to David Koresh to resolve this problem? What is your advice, since you know
I
him the
feel
best?
like, and I beg so hard, if I could go in there and talk to him face to face, I feel like if the government would let me do that, I could get him to come out.
talk him out of it.
Talk him out of it.
I don't believe that. I don't believe you.
Maybe.
I don't believe you have a clue as to what your grandson believes.
Well,
you
you
were in the
don't
cult
believe
for
he
5
believes in
years.
family.
I sat in his teachers for years. I listened to the man give 15-hour studies day after day after day. I know exactly what he believes, exactly what he teaches. I don't think you know what you're talking about.
I
don't
do
believe
know.
what
And I
you're
didn't
talking
see you down there very
You
often.
weren't. If this cult was so wonderful, if your grandson was such a nice person, how come you didn't come and join us? Okay?
My dear child, I have a husband for 7 long years, has been very ill. I've been in the hospital myself, about 3 or 4 times. I think you don't even know what you're talking
And
about.
so has my father.
But
and
he
he's dead.
was going to come get us if we were all right to take us this summer and have a family reunion.
But were you going to join his group? Were you going to become
I
part of
didn't say I was going to join his group. He never asked me to join his group. Furthermore, he says I am not a cult member. I believe in helping people that needs help. And I'm sure y'all have got a...
Ma'am, I think it's great that it's wonderful that you believe in your son, or excuse me, your grandson, as much as you do. But I think you need to be very open to what these other people are saying, because people don't talk for no reason. And obviously, these two have gone through quite a bit. And I think that you just need to be more open-minded, and I think you need to take into consideration what they're saying to you, because people don't talk for no reason.
And let me tell you something. You don't have to take our word for it. I can go and we can find easily 10 to 15 other people who will corroborate what we're saying, former cult members, and they will agree with us completely, everything we're saying.
Well, you came out of the cult in what, 1989?
1989.
Why didn't you go to the police then and bring all of this stuff?
Reason number one, we didn't go to the police because at the time he was not committing any of the crimes that he's committing now.
Oh, he just started that?
Since 1989, he has started getting illegal weapons. Also, we did not directly witness any of the alleged child abuse. My wife had indirect knowledge of it because of other girls telling other girls.
No,
she said
no,
she saw it.
I was there when... Kira? No, it wasn't Kira. Tara.
No, I'm talking about the sexual abuse. I'm talking about, we did not personally witness him having sexual relations with any of these young girls, but we knew about it because it was common knowledge in the group.
And I had a 15-year-old sister that slept with him.
You did?
Yes.
How many people, is your sister still in the commune?
No.
No, she's not.
How many people were there when you were there? Total population.
Approximately 75 people.
Okay.
The ex-cult member said that the only way that he's going to go out is if he's a martyr, if he's murdered. Your relatives, do you think that he is going to get killed? I mean, do you think that he's going to, do you think he wants to be a martyr?
You do not? The answer is no? Question.
Do you think that by him doing what he's doing that he is going to really, truly end up devastating the whole community? You don't believe so?
You do not believe that. Question.
Yes, how did he get his financial backing to get all these weapons and the buildings?
Okay,
where does the money come from?
My understanding is from my mother and my sister who came out of the group about a year after I did, is that people work in the cities wherever they can find jobs and they hand over their paychecks to him, and he keeps cash in a safe that he has a combination to.
All 75 people?
All the people in the group that have jobs,
work and
the majority of them give them their money.
But not all of them have jobs.
Yeah.
I wondered if your families are at any risk still in the compound now that you're out.
Physical risk, yes. But they chose that.
No, I mean because you're out and speaking out against them.
No, because they would be denouncing us along with Koresh and saying that we're traitors and Jews.
Has your family denounced you and said you were traitors?
Yes, my father has.
What did he say about you?
He said that I needed to learn some things. I was, undisciplined, young man. I had, things like that.
Anybody denounce you?
My parents and I have never really gotten along, so there wasn't really much denouncing to do.
Yes.
Jean, how do you feel about your grandson killing the FBI members?
Well, we're supposed to protect our homes. And if you're fired on all those little children and other people in there, what would you do?
I would surrender the authorities. I would surrender the authorities to go through due process of law, or else we're going to have anarchy in this country.
Next, we're going to meet the attorney who tried to put David Koresh behind bars. This attorney who tried him says he wouldn't be surprised to find out that David Koresh has already escaped from the compound right under everyone's nose. Stay with us. We have been taping this a little bit before you have seen it. We are discussing the standoff between federal agents and David Koresh, who is the cult leader in Waco, Texas, that has his followers believing he is the Messiah. This is El Hadi Shabbat. He prosecuted David Koresh in 1987 for attempted murder, but David was acquitted of all charges. El Hadi, are you surprised by the events in Waco, Texas?
Absolutely not. Matter of fact, myself and several other members of the district attorney's office in Waco predicted that this was going to happen. We tried to tell people that this was going to happen. We tried to tell the McLennan County community that this was going to happen because everybody was saying that this was a religious cult. But when you examine the evidence, you could see that this man had all these weapons, 10,000 rounds of ammunition. He was fully clothed in military gear, Vietnam boots, camouflage boots. Everybody had a sidearm belt and sidearms ranging from Colt 45s, 357 Magnums. They had M16s. They had walkie-talkies. They had a map as to how they were going to go on to this property now called Mount Carmel and assassinate this man called George Roden. And because George Roden had such a bad reputation in the Waco area, they said it was okay. And I was somewhat made the bad guy because I was taking all the money and prosecuting these people. And I was a new district attorney, and I didn't know what I was doing. But when you looked at this thing,
well, now wait,
I said, these people are dangerous.
You're assuming something, Abadi, that we understand. There was a trial.
Yes.
He was being tried for killing who?
Attempted murder.
Attempted murder of?
George Roden.
Who is George Roden?
He's the son of Ben and Lois Roden, who also was in a clash with David Koresh to be the leader at that time.
He was a cult leader of that group himself. There was a clash.
Right.
The man was killed, and David was tried.
No one was killed. David tried...
Attempted murder.
Right. David and 7 co-defendants. They were the assassination platoon that went on to the Mount Carmel property to kill George Roden. It was just so happened that Mr. Roden woke up a little early and saw them moving, and he went and got his Uzi, and there was a firefight for about 3 or 4 hours out there before the McLennan County Sheriff Department went out there and broke it up.
Okay, El Hadi, tell us, in prosecuting this case, what evidence did you have against David? What was your just give me your strong suits.
We had M16s rifles. We had several other semi-assault rifles. We had 5 canisters of ammunition that we counted on one Saturday morning.
That doesn't mean he was going to kill that man with it.
Oh, yes, because when you pull some 1,100 rounds out of barns and trees and you have casings that was aimed at George Roden and he was on his property legally, I mean, he had the right to wake up in the morning without an assassination platoon coming out there to kill him.
Now, why do you think you lost the case?
Well,
why was he acquitted?
Well, first of all, because of the complaining witness himself. Here was this charismatic young man, blue-eyed, hair, straightforward, and when he went to trial, he had a suit on. Here's George Roden, who was considered very eccentric, like, for instance, digging up a casket with a body in it, trying to resurrect the body himself. He had put profanity in some federal pleadings. He considered himself the Messiah. He was a fat man with a straggly beard, dark, and and he talked bad to everybody. So the community didn't like George Roden. So in this trial, it was George Roden against David Koresh. And we were trying to hammer away that, hey, it may be George Roden today, no matter how crazy he may be. But who will it be tomorrow? And in addition to that, there was the bizarre nature of the trial. The defense attorney had his defendants to bring up the casket with the body in it up to the McLennan County Courthouse, up to the 3rd floor, and that whole day we argued before the judge, which was a visiting judge, whether he was going to admit the casket with the dead body in it in the evidence. Now, this is what I was facing, plus I was told to shut up, sit down, and don't get out of my seat.
Well, pretty interesting. What do you think is happening now? I mean, what's going on?
Right now, there is the public relations campaign.
For who?
Now, for both sides. The government has to get its lies together. David Koresh has to get his lies together so that when they come to trial, because there are a lot of people in this country, due to our credo of rugged individualism, being left alone, the government doesn't have an airtight case, people. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if David Koresh come out of this thing smelling like a rose.
You think if he were tried today, he'd walk free?
Well, I don't know about today, but I do know this, that if the government was investigating this matter for 8 months if all they came up with was hearsay that somebody was going to commit suicide, it's not a crime to want to commit suicide. You can't go on this area, and plus, the element of surprise, when they talk about element of surprise, you can't surprise somebody out there in the wide open spaces. See, they had the city-urban mentality when they went out there. We're going to come out there and surprise them. Well, if they were so well prepared, why weren't they surprised about, why weren't they prepared to deal with not being surprised? You know, the element of surprise.
Did you hear what they were talking about?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any disagreement with what they've said?
None whatsoever.
Take a break. We'll be right back.
None whatsoever.
This is Bill Goldberg. He is a cult expert with the Cult Awareness Network here in New York. Bill, how does somebody like David Koresh have so much control over the followers?
You've got to understand...
We don't understand this at all.
Right. You've got to understand, Sally, that this is a charismatic man who is able to convince people that he's got their best interests at heart. A man that has, from what I've learned of him, no conscience, no ability to see another person as a separate entity. I wish I could be as sanguine as Debbie and David are about the possibility that there's not going to be a mass suicide or mass murder that takes place in Waco.
Give me a profile on a cult leader. Are they insane?
They've got a personality disorder that's called a sociopathic personality. They're very glib people. They're people that you could just fall in love with because they seem to be so wonderful. But again, they have no conscience. There's no sense of where they end and somebody else begins. When this man feels himself to be threatened by the authorities, then everybody in the compound is threatened. There's no sense that they're any different than he is. And that's what happened in Jonestown, Guyana. The people in the cult are completely and totally dependent upon his mental health for their personal well-being.
Sally, let me say this in connection with what he's saying. Under excruciating cross-examination during this trial, David Koresh got on the witness stand. He showed how to break down this weapon, and he stated that he taught all of his men to be able to break down these weapons, put them back together again.
What were the weapons?
M16s.
Okay.
In the dark. I put the weapon in his hand and asked him to demonstrate how he was trying to kill George Roden. He got down on one knee. He pointed the weapon at the jury. He fired, went pow, pow, and I put him in my sights and everything. He got back up on the witness stand, and the jury, and there were some young women on the jury, and they were sitting there just making goo-goo eyes at this man and like was real thrilled about trying to kill George Roden. Some people made comments about, well, the sheriff should have came out there at least 30 minutes later, then we would have gotten rid of George Roden, at least one of the messiahs. So he's very charismatic, and he has that true innocence that can hypnotize you and brainwash you if you're not careful and have a need for something.
Obviously, some of the people...
He can be very funny. He can be very sweet. He can be very nice.
He's very hard for a lot of us to understand. You're Pat Cuskey.
Yes.
She is a former cult member of a different cult. What was the cult?
I followed a man in Connecticut by the name of Brother Julius, and he's in central Connecticut, and he also believes that he's Jesus Christ.
What is your thoughts and opinions of what you've been listening to today?
My leader was, and the tactics that he uses, was almost identical. Our group was almost identical to their group. This leader has 8 quote-unquote wives and many women that he sleeps with. There are many abuses that take part in the group, sexual abuses, psychological abuses, constant. And it's almost identical. The only thing that we did not have was an arsenal.
You didn't have all those guns. Okay, thank you. Take a break. We'll be right back. Bill, can you give us a profile on the people who go into the cult?
Aside from the people that were born into the cult,
yes,
those that join are usually in a transition period in their lives where they haven't got the roots that would help them get over a small hump. I don't want you to think that the people that get involved in cults believe the absurdities because they're true believers or something like that. They're in a low period in their lives, a cult leader comes along, what he says seems to make sense slowly, and it leads inexorably down a road. And they start to believe absurdities, not because when they first heard it, it would make sense, but because they've had their believability kind of lessened. And if you believe absurdities, then you can commit atrocities.
Are there more cults now or more people in cults now than there have been? And if so, why?
I don't believe there are. I think the difference, the reason we're hearing about it, frankly, is because middle-class people, intelligent people, well-read people are getting involved in cults.
Why are intelligent, well-read people getting involved in cults?
You know, I think it has to do with our society, with rootlessness, with a sense that things change so often in this society that we don't have a feeling of extended family. We don't have a sense of being rooted to our past that people had in previous generations.
A question to the prosecutor. What reason did David get to court for having so much firepower in the commune?
There was two reasons. One was that they had found out that George Roden had dug up this body and was trying to resurrect this body so that he can claim himself as the Messiah. Secondly, it was over land. Mr. Roden had under great violence thrown David Koresh and his group off the land and sent them to Palestine. So David Koresh said that he saw, or he had a message from God to go back on the land like Joshua went to the promised land.
David, are you saying yes, that's what happened?
Yes, I agree. David Koresh has always felt that the property belongs to him, that it was his right by God, and he would use whatever means necessary to take it.
This is to David's grandmother. I want to know what you think David did to help these people. Why you keep sticking up for David. What can you tell us that he's done to help these people?
Well, Mrs. Roden herself told me that when he joined the group, that he worked outside and gave all his money to her as a caretaker to provide food and whatever they needed.
Who was it that he gave his money to?
Lois Roden. Lois Roden.
The same woman that he had sexual relations with and manipulated her emotionally in her time of need. Yes, David Koresh admitted this himself in studies in the group, himself.
He said he was having physical relations.
He said so.
Question.
This question is for David and Debbie. I'm wondering what suggestions you can give to people who are maybe looking for a church but don't know how to distinguish it from a cult.
Well, I would recommend the advice of this man over here. Plus, I would say that you have to be careful and look at the social structure of the group. Make sure that the group allows individuals to make their own decisions and doesn't try to tell them what to do, and allows the people to use their own reasoning powers to decide what truth is.
Keep your eyes on Jesus, the one who really died on the cross.
Take a break, we'll be right back.
The one who really died.
For free tickets to the Sally Jesse Raphael Show, write Sally Jesse Raphael, Post Office Box 1400, Radio City Station, New York, New York, 10101.
If you're worried that some close family member, relative, or someone is becoming involved with a cult, what does one do?
The first thing you have to do is to find out more about the organization. And this can be done through an organization like the Cult Awareness Network or the American Family Foundation. They're in the telephone books, and they give information to people about cults. They can help you get in touch with somebody who's left the group or who knows a lot about the group, and they can then help to cut beyond the verbiage, cut beyond the fact that he buys a bag of tacos for people and sees that as an example of a person.
Yes. I have a question. I'm directing my question to the relatives of this particular person, David.
Jean and Susan.
Okay, Jean and Susan. I happen to be a victim of abuse from a charismatic man. Okay, and I have taken everything to a DA's office. I'm out of it. Why are you in such denial over a person in your life who is actually guilty? Is it because you're his relatives covering up for him?
Well, let her answer the question. Susan, why are you in denial?
Do you have proof that he's guilty? We haven't seen any proof that he is guilty. We have these people's word down here. That's all we have is people that were in the cult
They've been kicked out
That's
for one
exactly
reason
right.
or another.
We were in it.
Now they're
You were
coming
not.
forward. They should have come forward when they were kicked out and brought all this out.
See, you dismiss the testimony of people that have been members of the group because they're apostates. And
But
they
now
can't
they're
possibly,
mad.
they turn, and they're mad. And you don't listen to anyone that doesn't know anything about the cult because they couldn't know. So the only people that you listen to are the people that are still in.
But all
you
we're looking for
conveniently
is
narrow your
show
consciousness.
some
All you know is what he's told you. That's really credible.
Same with you. That's all we know. It's what you
No,
told
in
us.
fairness,
Yeah, but I was in it and you were
I must
not.
say that you're in this country, you're innocent until proven
That's
guilty.
right. That's the way it's
And
supposed
I have talked to Mr. Koresh for 2 or 3 hours on several occasions when he came to the DA's office trying to convince me of his way of life. And he's a nice guy. You know, he talks, he really believes in what he's doing, and he has that true innocence. And if you're not careful, he will convince you of his way. But even though the jury came back with an acquittal and hung jury and so forth, we live in a country of laws. The only thing that I didn't like about this man was that he felt that he was above the law, and this is what caught my eye and reason why we prosecute him in Waco.
Do they always feel they're above the law?
Well, how can you possibly use man's law to hold down a God?
Because you're God.
Absolutely, absolutely. And therefore, again, you have no boundaries. There's nobody that's on you saying, no, you can't do this, no, don't do this. That's how cult leaders grow up in the cult. That's how they get their power.
Didn't Jesus say something about false prophets?
Oh, yes.
What is it?
Well, many will come in my name, but I will know them not.
Take a break.
If you'd like to order a video cassette of Sally's show for only $24.95, call Video Archives at 1-800-FOR-VIDEO. For a transcript, send $3 to 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203, or call 303-831-9000.
Thank you all for being with us. Don't forget the Cult Awareness Network. Good luck if you have to try him again. What do you want to say to your grandson?
I want to tell him that I have begged. I would love to go in.
the camera.
I would love to go in there, David, and be able to talk to you in person. And I've got a few things I'd love to tell you. But if they would give me the right to go in and talk to you face to face, I know you would come out and face this thing, and we could prove who's right and wrong. I love you with all my heart and soul.
Some members of our audience will receive, and a promotional fee has been provided by
It's a fun talk show with a twist. Join Vicki Lawrence for guests and laughs that'll jumpstart your morning. Watch Vicki tomorrow morning at 9 right here on KCAL.